Hello everyone, I'm Rishi Persad and welcome back to Racing Weekly, a podcast and YouTube show brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. Alongside me today, one person who has been in absolutely sensational tipping form so far in this series of Racing Weekly, and that's Steve Ryder. And the other side of me, someone who I'm delighted to have back on my right-hand side. It's not the first time, in fact, not her first time on Racing Weekly, but we go back a long way. I was remembering when we worked together on the morning line. Yeah, Tanya Stevenson is here. Yeah. How are you, Tans?
Oh, in absolutely superb form. I was at Haydock on Saturday. The atmosphere was absolutely amazing. I've been going racing lots and lots, contrary to people thinking that I might be hiding away. I've been doing lots of racing. In fact, fingers crossed, weather permitting. I've be racing later this week in Kelso. Next week I'll be at Ludlow. So keeping abreast of it the whole time. It's just so much fun this season. So much to discuss, isn't it?
How's the tipping or the punting going for you?
It was mixed at the weekend, really was mixed. Was pleased that Famous Bridge ran as it did. Yeah. Not pleased on some other counts at the weekend, okay. But I'm always looking forward because you trace back, I write notes, horses to follow, and I was pleased to see a few that have run well and won at the weekend, like Cam Simas, because I really was taken by Look Away, and Look Away ran so good in the Greatwood. So you kind of have your own threads and your own notes, and I urge race goers and people watching this to do the same. Get your own intuition, get your own thoughts. Just write horses down, and then you can sort of do barometers off them and see the form lines off them.
But of course, if your own intuition is no good, like some of us, you can always rely on a good tipster. And a good tipster on a great run at the moment is Steve Ryder, flying along. Yeah. How many winners did you? Was it 4 winners that you?
Yeah, the only one that were. Yeah.
Don't say it.
The only one that let us down was the one that you agreed with me on, who decided to fall at the first.
Oh, what cool.
Good weekend.
Yeah, great weekend for you. Yeah. And terrific racing as well, to also get some of it right on what was a very enjoyable weekend of racing.
Yeah, lots of talking points, some disappointments in there, and lots of shake-ups for the Cheltenham Anti-Post markets.
Yeah, more on that very shortly. Now, Tans, one thing we always try and do is get a horse that's really impressed you so far this season at the top of the show. What have you got?
I saw that you noted it. Can I first of all say a jockey?
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, say a jockey, and it's Miss Molly Landau. Absolutely superb. I think she's had 4 winners from her 11 rides so far. If you were watching Plumpton the other day, brilliant she was on that. She's got a right sense of humour as well, because each time she's doorstepped by Matt, he sort of refers to Dad, who I remember riding Lanarei around the national fences. He was superb in that, and then went on to win at Sandown. But she's just got a right sense of humour, but she's superb, and at the moment still enormous value when she's riding the horses. The £7 claim will not last, and come the big festivals, she'll be sought upon to ride. As for horses, I saw this and I wrote down a couple. First of all, Al Dancer. When you watched Al Dancer in his race at Aintree, he was one of those within that race that desperately wanted the fences that were omitted. Had they not been omitted, Al Dancer would have been. I was thinking Beecher Chase, but perhaps he's not going to the Beecher Chase. But when he does run again, he ran supremely well, was desperate for another 3 or 4 fences in that race. And then, of course, I think everyone has jotted down Django By, mainly because what happened to Ben Pauling's horse this weekend. I think they were they were coming across the finishing line when the remainder was still coming around the final bend. They were just brilliant, a bit like a couple at Ascot the weekend. So Django By, Al Dancer, and of course Miss Molly Landau. She's just, she's going to be really, well, she's good already. Okay. So. Yeah.
Well, those are good for you names to follow. Molly Landau, as well as a couple of horses for Tanya. Django Bay has been mentioned a fair few times, but Al Dancer, one to add to your list. Now on Racing Weekly, time for Racing Recap. And this week on Racing Recap, we start in the obvious place, the Betfair Chase up at Haydock. And Tanya, you were there.
Yes.
There seemed to be, obviously, great deal of respect for what Royal Pagaille did, but also a bit of disappointment about the race with what happened to Brave Man's Game, Protectorat, encouragement for Corach Rambler.
Yeah, I don't know what was wanted from the race. There was a few strands to take out of it. There was much discussion of where Harry Cobden should have ridden. Should we just discuss where Braveman's came? It was just really strange that he came from the Charlie Hall to come to the race on Saturday. I thought that was really odd. I'm trying to work out the cogs in the grain of sand. I'm trying to work out the plan for Braveman's Game. Obviously, the plan was Kempton, a bit like another horse we would talk about. Now, does he go to Kempton again? Obviously, he will go to Kempton, but how much has that detracted from his chances? What was the expectation from that Charlie Hall chase? Did we think he was going to be the finished article again? We love him. We had Protectorat, who won the race last year, and we were expecting maybe he would fly out and go along. Many people were discussing the first run for the season for Corach Rambler. We expected him to be a lot better this time around. I think what we can decide from Corach Rambler, he needs more than like 15 horses in a race to see the best of Corach Rambler, because he likes to weave through his field and nothing to grab hold of. But also, Corach Rambler's rating probably meant that he shouldn't have been close to them anyway, so he ran superbly. Royal Pagaille came into the race and was a real consideration because he'd been second in the race a couple of years ago. He's always one of these frustrating horses, an excellent horse that is kind of fifth on your top list, isn't he? And he's come into this race. Venetia Williams is tremendous form, flying form. So suddenly he's a real runner because he's had 4 runs at Haydock, 3 of them were wins. Coming back into this, the race then falls apart because of various reasons. Protectorat, he just put a line through. He just wasn't happy with the day. Corach Rambler was suddenly came into contention when you expect him. With Haydock's a speed course. He's not. Corach Rambler's not a Aintree Mildmay or a Haydock course. He's a Cheltenham, as we know, Grand National winner. So he was the first Grand National winner to run in the race. So it tells you something. I don't know what we expected from the race. We got Royal Pagaille, who now Venetia suggests will go to the King George. Braveman's Game will be there, but has anyone had a look at the King George now? Take a deep breath. There will be a French winner of the King George. That's how you take it. No wonder Gordon Elliott's thinking, hold on a minute, he must have looked like I am.
Jerry Colon.
Yeah. He must think, oh my goodness, there's nothing. Well, there is plenty in the King George. Braveman's Game, you won't want to face top form, you won't face Protectorat top form, but they're not at the moment. And Royal Pagaille was because I don't want to belittle Royal Pagalle's performance, but had the other two been in the top of the game, would Royal Pagaille cross the line in front? It was plenty to talk about.
It's a fair question. In fairness, Steve, you kind of had a feeling about how the race might fall apart, which is why you went for Royal Pagaille yourself. Were you satisfied, obviously getting that right? We know you're satisfied. But about the race as a guide to the future, are you satisfied with it?
I am. I wanted, Royal Pagaille to win, obviously. I thought his chances would be lessened by the fact that they missed most of the rain. So it was officially called soft ground. But Charlie Deutsch was kind of very clever with that, who's riding brilliantly this season.
As always, he's such a good rider.
Yeah. He was wise to that and put pressure on at halfway. So I wasn't happy with Royal Pagaille early on in the race, but then he kind of injected a bit of pace and that kind of found out Protectorat, put him under pressure and he fell away. And it just meant that Darryl Jacob couldn't get a breather in on Braveman's Game. And
stamina came into play.
Coming down that straight, there was only going to be one winner. He obviously had fantastic Haydock form. He's now won 4 wins and a second from his 5 runs at the track. I do think he'll probably struggle for the rest of the season now, though. King George, I don't think would suit. He's now 8-1 with Bet365 for that. There's an outsider in the King George that I'll chuck in, Edward Stone at 33-1 for the King George. He's obviously going to head to the Peterborough Chase. He's a top class 2-miler. He's brilliant going right-handed. He's unbeaten going right-handed when he has finished every race. He obviously unseated a rider at Kempton once. But he'd be an outsider for the King George because it's now wide open. Braveman's Game's now gone out to sort of 11-4 for the race. And the preparation for him it is a big question mark.
Yeah, Edward Stone might be taking the sort of Edredon Blur route to the King George. Yeah. But the Braveman's Game thing, I understand why people might be against him because, of course, he looked like he should have come on for the Charlie Hall run. And maybe people were disappointed in what he did. But I'm in your camp that his stamina was drawn out on that track at Haydock, and I think it doesn't suit him, whereas Kempton is more his track. The other thing as well is that, looking back at some of the old King George races, horses would have 4
Yes,
or
they
5
would.
runs before the King George. I mean, Wayward Lad, I know it was a long time ago, everyone, but sort of my
I
era.
was there.
But when Wayward Lad won it as an 11-year-old, he had 4 runs before the King George. He had 3 in November, and then 1 in December, then the King George, then he won. So, and Paul Nicholls has always been, of all the top trainers certainly in Britain, he's been far more acceptable when it comes to racing horses freely. I mean, obviously, Courto Star in 2006-7 would be the best example. I'm not saying Brave Man's Game's a Courto Star, definitely not. But I think maybe when they reach a certain age, you've got to run them. And you've just got to get on with it.
Yeah, for me, he's still the one to beat at Kempton.
Brave Man's Game. I agree.
But for the era at the last, he would have been the Weatherby winner. It was just, for me, odd that, and I can see why you run him at Haydock, because you're looking at Haydock and thinking there's not much opposition coming, and however the race panned out in a way that didn't suit him, so move on next to Kempton. Yes, he's still the one to beat, but I just feel when you look below Brave Man's Game, I'm just really encouraged by a potential French win, because then they have the French have the one, but then it needs to rain a bit. If you look at the French Challenge, it does need lots and lots of rain.
Let's spin through some of the other races. The Stairs Handicap Hurdle, Slate Lane, just lobbed around, never really looked in danger. Crambo, a big eye catcher.
Yeah, I was worried about Slate Lane early on. I thought he was far too keen in the early stages. I thought that would mean that he would struggle late on. I mean, Target Trainer is used all the time, but Emmett Mullen is just unbelievable at targeting these big, valuable handicaps on the flat and over jumps. I mean, I looked at it. He earned more for winning this than what State Man and Fast or Slow did winning the Grade Ones over in Ireland. Yeah. So Target Trainers, as they go, is brilliant. I joked with Gavin on the show a couple of weeks ago that the Slate Lane, only a matter of time, double might have been on. So you'd obviously be sick as a pig if you'd put that on with obviously that rival running out. The beaten horses in behind were interesting. Fine Margin drifted all day, went off an SP of 22-1 on his first run for Willie Mullins on his reappearance. So that could probably be upgraded. And then you've got the ride on Crambo in third.
What were your thoughts?
I thought it was interesting that he went inside. I thought he'd have stood more of a chance if he'd have stayed outside and kind of come with run down the outside.
But he had to manoeuvre his way there, and that cost him ground, didn't it?
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what they do with him. Stayers Hurdle was mentioned pre-race, is 22-1 with Bet365 for that. It doesn't look the strongest division, so you can understand why they go there. The winner, are they going to try and get him qualified for the Pertemps? Possibly. It'd be interesting to see what the handicapper does with him. But yeah, I was a bit lukewarm on the race on the whole.
I see that the winner has entered for Navan in a listed handicap hurdle. So, but that was like the 8th wonder of the world, wasn't it? How that Slate Lane clattered the few hurdles, and you're watching it thinking, he's going to get there, Crampo's going to get there. It just kept going further and further clear. And Emmett Mullins, just the record now in this country of wins is just phenomenal, isn't it? It's just it was a great race to watch, and you someone like me would write down Fine Margin. When I was speaking earlier about if you want to write down horses, you write down Fine Margin for next time, because it drifted in the market. That sort of thing is key for me.
All right, the Novices Hurdle. Last year, Tamurus won in the Noel Philly colours. This year, it was Camsinas, who also raced in the same colours. I really liked his performance, because he always looked in control of the race. And I always liked the fact that no matter how the race was unfolding, his attitude was really positive. You know, head down, terrier-like in the way he went about his business.
Watch him back in October at Cheltenham. Watch him then. I urge everyone to watch him then, because it was the same sort of performance, but it was your seasonal reappearance performance. And he had that same sort of oozing confidence, the horse, the economical way that he goes over his hurdles. And at that point, of course, he couldn't really look away. Now we see why. But if those two met again, what do you think? But it was a real polished performance at Haydock, I felt.
He's a real pro, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think he's heading for the race that was the Tolworth, and it's moved now to
entry on Boxing Day.
Yeah. What sort of level do you think he's at?
It'll be interesting to see the makeup of that race. There was obviously some disappointments in behind. Primus and both Bowens Park were both real disappointments. Obviously, the latter fell at the last one, well beaten. It's going to be interesting to see because obviously the form boost was there with Look Away, but he still went off sort of threes in the market.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting race looking at. That the Old Torworth Hurdle is an obvious step. I really hope they go there with Django Bay. Obviously we've touched on him earlier on. Form boost would tell her the name, winning by 14 lengths at Haydock. That could be a good early season novice hurdle over in the UK.
All right. What did you make of the graduation chase? Grey Dawning. Obviously, any fans of Stay Away Faye, and obviously a lot of people are fans of Stay Away Faye, would have been encouraged by that. But what about Grey Dawning in focus?
Yeah, I mean, he put in some fantastic leaps. I mean, he took a chance at a few, and that could end in disaster one day. But it was a good performance on only a second chase start. They're interested in these graduation chases because you had obviously Apple Away making her chasing debut against Gare de Menil, who's obviously won the National Hunt Chase and ran well in the Grand National. Yeah. So the makeup of the race was good. I was quite disappointed with Gare de Menil. I know it was his seasonal debut, but they did send him off favourite. So I know it was over a trip shorter than ideal, but I thought he would run a bit better. Grey Dawning, has been put up £7 to 144, so the handicap was impressed. But yeah, I'd be a bit lukewarm on him going forward as well.
All right. What did you make of that, Tons?
I thought that it was a case of Harry, hang on, because the horse said, I'm going and you're coming with me, and it was a joy to watch. That's what you'd like to see, and that was the race, I think, that really stirred the crowd. It helps, obviously, that it is grey, but it just stirred the crowd because everyone was going, you could hear every sense, and it was just a joy to watch because you felt the horse had the confidence. And I mean, we're thinking, oh my goodness, you can't take chances like that. But he took chances at Haydock, so that should stand the horse in good stead virtually anywhere. It'd be intriguing if it ever ran at Warwick, but that would be, I think, a case. He reminded me so much of character building, the way that he attacked his fence. It's such a joy to watch. And it was a case, rather than Harry hanging on, rather than teaching the horse to jump. And you very rarely see that, so really taken by it. And I loved Apple Away. I think she showed that she may need a little bit further because she always looked on the hurry up early doors. And you've got to remember she was 16 to 1 when she won the Grade 1 at Aintree. She was against Iroko. She was against some really good sorts then that were coming to the end of their season. But that was her first run for 225 days, and we've seen that some of Lucinda's have needed them, i.e. Coric Rambler, and I was really pleased with that, and I should think they were as well. They were chuffed considering what a potential Grey Dawning is. 25
to 1 for the Brown Advisory. The winner, Grey Dawning, 16 to 1 with Bet365. A lot of chat before the weekend about where Harry Cobden was going to go. Well, he and Paul Nicholls, they got it right, as he so often does. He went to Ascot. He had 4 winners from 4 rides. And it's worth pointing out that when we talk about the principal one, Pic D'Orhy, we focus on what happened with Shishkin, because that puts everything into context. So what was your view of Shishkin's behaviour and what happened?
He was just being naughty. He just knows too much. I felt well done to the starter. Gave him a couple of chances because Sophie could see what was happening the first time. He was digging his hooves in the first time, and she went back, got him, and gave him a second go. And he just thought, no, not today. He's just fixated, was it? She gave him a second go, and I mean, there's been much discussed, and there will be further much discussed. And what I took the most out of that, though, was the interview afterwards, where everyone's thinking, "Oh my goodness, he's got to run somewhere next. Well, where do you want him to go?" And this is where I mentioned Kempton was the obvious thought. But Nikki kept saying, "I'm really worried about Kempton because it's the same as Ascot at the start." So,
but wasn't the start at Ascot the other side, though?
The other side, and Kempton's right by the stands.
I suppose
down
maybe he will be thinking about where the start is at Kempton. Yeah. So, tell me about Shishkin, your thoughts on that, but then also about Pic D'Orhy and whether you can be truly impressed by what he did.
So starting with Pic D'Orhy, I was a bit underwhelmed. I didn't think he jumped and travelled with his normal enthusiasm. When you saw Shishkin not start, you thought, oh, this is just going to be 25 lengths. And then Straw Jack around the outside, I thought, oh my God, you've actually got a chance of winning this. But yeah, I was quite disappointed. He'd need to up his game if he was going to win that Grade 1
jumping
Ascot in February.
He's jumped a lot better than that.
Yeah. So that was quite disappointing, even though he's obviously won the race. Shishkin's obviously unlucky. It was 48 hours after the BHA announced that you're not allowed a hunting crop behind runners to make them start. Would that have made a difference? I don't know. I got into an interesting debate a couple of weeks ago on Twitter with someone. It was a midweek novice hurdle, and the favourite didn't jump off. And he said, how is this good for the game? When a new punter has backed a horse and it's not started and they lose their money. Well, obviously this was a bit different with Shishkin being kind of, I suppose, a main event on a Saturday. The majority of bookmakers have refunded money or refunded money as a free bet. But I then went through and I asked a few people that aren't into horse racing the question of, if you've backed this horse, do you expect to lose your bet? And the majority of them said, well, no, it hasn't started. And then I pulled the other card of, if you've backed the winner, do you think that you should face a deduction? Well, no, I shouldn't do that either, because that's nothing to do with my horse and my bet. So it is quite interesting. You can't have the best of both worlds, really. You've got, if you'd have, I suppose, implemented a rule 4, it would have been, what, 60, 65p if Shishkin hadn't ran, and then everyone that back picked Dory would have then kicked off. What I really want a bookmaker to do for the rehearsal chase on Saturday at Newcastle is have a market of, you can back Shishkin at 13 to 8, and you can have anti-post rules. If he doesn't start, you've done your money. But you can back him at even money if you like, and if he doesn't start, you can have your money back. And kind of set a different market, because that would then take out the whole rule 4 for any of the other horses, because anyone that's backed him has done so knowing that we're not going to give a justice refund at this price, but if you want to have that as an insurance, you can back him at that price. And I'd love a bookmaker to do that on Saturday.
What do you reckon, Tom?
That's a very, very good point. You can have a bet without market as well, but what Steve puts is absolutely spot on. There is the scenario that the Shishkin, if you've backed the Shishkin and he doesn't run, you want your money back argument, or are you in the argument of the rule 4? If you do get the money back, there is the rule 4. It is such a contentious issue, and perhaps, I mean, just being a little bit cynical, had Shishkin been Strawfan Jack, and this discussion wouldn't have been happening, but because it isn't, and it's good because it's brought it into discussion that it is Shishkin, but it also puts up that horrendous quandary now, because we'll be all watching to when he next runs, and the focus will be more on the start.
Well, the other thing about Shishkin is it's a gradual sort of degradation of his mentality. You know, you watch him going round first of all, his running over 2 miles has suggested that he's become either lazier or slower, I'm not entirely certain. Then his run in the Ryanair suggested a horse that wasn't entirely in love with everything. Then he starts off this season, and obviously he's got the cheek pieces on, so there's something going on in the trainer's mind, connections mind, that, you know, maybe this horse needs it. And then he does that at the start. So as far as I'm concerned, whenever he runs, you can't get involved with, just on a straight, normal betting. You just can't get involved with Shishkin at the moment. So
I lived through Vodkatini. Well, we've always lived through Mad Moose, but I lived
before that.
Lived through Vodkatini before that. Dad and I had a pitch when Vodkatini was making Shishkin look Archangel Gabriel, but he was a horse of immense talent as well. So we're going to see where he turns up next.
Might be this weekend.
It might be at Newcastle. It'd be lovely to see him turn up at Newcastle. He's got if he does, he's going to have to do his own feat there at weight-bearing performance, but we shall see. It's an argument that goes on and on. We love the debate to continue, because it's going to polarise everyone what you should do with the Shishkin scenario, isn't it?
Correct. Let's talk about some of the other winners from Ascot. Blue King Daru, he was part of that full-timer for Nichols and Cobden. I thought he got a very good ride. No nonsense. He had to work hard to beat Strong Leader, who travelled through the race really kindly.
Yeah, it's nice to see Strong Leader get back to form, because he was really disappointed on his reappearance. Obviously, that second at Aintree behind in the pocket was good form, and then completely disappointed on his reappearance. So it was good to see him back. You mentioned the ride. I mean, Blue King Daru was kind of first off the bridle. Having tipped him on here, I was worried round in the turn. Obviously, Goshen was first beaten, really. I don't know what's going on with him. So Royale's probably past his best, and probably, I don't think he's a 2.5 miler either. Then you got onto Theatre Glory. She travelled so well into the race. They sent her off favourite. That probably screamed that she needed her reappearance run, because her effort just flattened out into the straight. Blue King Daru, I think he'll probably struggle for the rest of the season. Obviously, he's now going to have a Grade 2 penalty for the rest of the year. The handicap has put him up £10 to 148. It's interesting to see where they go. I was impressed with his attitude, because for a horse who's won a couple of 2-mile handicap hurdles, you'd think he'd have the speed, and you would have thought that he'd probably be the last off the bridle in this race. but he didn't. He really knuckled down on 4, and I was quite impressed with his attitude.
Yeah, it's all fair points about Blue King Drew. The fact that he tried so hard, as Steve said, he was one of the first, if not, and he was off it for a long way as well.
Yeah, I felt a little bit sorry for Strong Leader because he found himself where he didn't probably want to be so early. Blue King Drew did make me have a wry smile when I looked back to see who the last 4-year-old winner was of the race, which happened to be Silvaniaco Conti. So we saw how his career path went.
Yes.
So are we seeing another one of that? And Blue King Drew as another one that to take out, a bit like Camsinas, out of that October Cheltenham meeting once again. Yeah. Be mindful, watch replays of races before the races themselves, and you might have pointers. I don't want to take anything away from Strong Leader. I think the pair of them were excellent. And Strong Leader, in fairness, watch. He was only beaten like a half, 3/4 of a length. Wasn't beaten far in that contest, and the pair of them really deserve big positive plaudits for both their performances.
Well, Steve tipped Blue King Drew, and then you tipped Boot Hill. Now, I know you thought maybe with Blue King Drew you would have been worried about maybe how things were going at one stage. What were the concerns with Boot Hill running down to the last?
The concern started at the start. He was far too keen in the early stages, and I kind of thought, well, hang on a minute, you're not going to have any sort of finishing effort. And then actually he was staying on really quite well between the second last and the last. Obviously jumped it with Sansegal. Obviously it was aided by that rival falling. And watching it live, I thought, do you know what, actually? I think Boot Hill would have still won. And then his finishing effort after the last was nowhere near what I was expecting. He really tied up. Frere Darms got within half a length at the finish, and you kind of now look at it in hindsight and think, actually, Sansegal would have probably won that. Handicap has put him up £3 up to a mark of 158. They're going to target the Clarence House Stakes, which is obvious, really. Ascot is his track. He's brilliant, going right-handed. But yeah, I'll chalk that down as a lucky success.
Well, you make your own luck. So well done, Boot Hill. Over in Ireland, again, terrific racing. State Man is just a lovely horse.
He is.
Paul Townend is clearly obsessed with him, primarily because he's such an easy horse to manoeuvre through a race. He settles, you can put him wherever you want. Paul Townend said he's just such a lovely individual to partner. And yes, he's won at a very short price, but in the grand scheme of champion hurdle contenders, really, there's one horse who just hangs over the entire thing, and you just go, okay, well done.
Yeah, you do. And you have to feel sorry for State Man, because ordinarily without that one horse, State Man would be racking up champion hurdles. However, looking at that race as well, though, didn't we think that Echoes in Rain, she looked big and burly, didn't she? She looked as though that race is going to... She's going to come on a bundle, and she finished quite close to State Man. She was, about 6-7 lengths behind. I thought that was a good performance. She travelled beautifully. State Man's excellent. We can understand why Paul Townend thinks he's wonderful, because he is wonderful, but unfortunately there's a problem which we'll all see at Newcastle. That's on the horizon.
So Constitution Hill will win all the races regarding champion hurdle trials here at 1 to 6, 7, 1 to 8, 10 to 1 on, whatever. State Man's going to do the equivalent in Ireland, is he?
Yeah.
Well, Imperial Pass is going to run in the Hatton's Grace on Sunday, so it's going to be interesting to see how much Paul Townend does love State Man when he has to choose between them at Cheltenham. It's going to go to the old Ruby's decision of riding Hurricane Fly or riding Faheen. Who do you go for? Because it's not exactly as if State Man's been here for years. They are probably both improving. It was interesting to see Paul Townend's quote afterwards, was that he does think he's improved from last year. Tanya mentioned Echoes in Rain looked big and burly, but he looked to be carrying a fair amount of condition in the paddock as well. So that would give Cheltenham backers hope going forward. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Willie does with both of the hurdlers this year. Okay.
Now, on Sunday, arguably one of the best races of the season. Now, people do moan, and I'm as much to blame and guilty of, when Willie Mullins has just about everything in every race. It seems a little bit dull. But there was one trainer who put something up against Willie Mullins in the John Durkan, and that was Martin Brassel, who has Fast or Slow. And in the end, it produced a wonderful race. And as hard as the Mullins battalion tried, they couldn't lower the colours, Tanya, of Fast or Slow.
Wasn't that the race of the season? I've had to watch it again and again
Brilliant.
and again.
Absolutely
but can
brilliant.
we also just say one of the rides of the season had to be Patrick Mullins on Appreciate It.
Yeah.
And no one's mentioned Appreciate It in all of this. Appreciate It was just fabulous. A bit like the Attack the Fence is a bit like Grey Dawning. Patrick Mullins was so positive, and without that we wouldn't have had the race that we did. And in the end, appreciate it got beat half a length. But well done, Fast or Slow. Oh my goodness, how on earth did Corach Rambler get that beaten in the Ultima? Yeah. I mean, I just had to watch it a few times since. That got beaten in the Ultima Fast or Slow somehow. I do not know how. And then went on to win at Punchestown, beating Brave Man's Game and Galopin de Champ, and now has come out and done the same. How that the trajectory for that horse's rating must be flying through the roof, and what a training performance by Martin Brazel. It's just awesome. No wonder he's all happy, smiling. It weren't just about that John Durkan victory. This horse last year was 66 to 1 for that race, was tailed off. This year, it's just breathtaking, wasn't it?
I was thinking, after the race, I was thinking, if Corach Rambler hadn't run this season and finished off winning the Grand National, you think you're waiting for Corach Rambler to come back. You'd be backing Corach Rambler for the Gold Cup, thinking, that's his race. Fast or Slow, as a guide, has beaten Galopin de Champ twice now. Anyway, we'll talk about that later on. What about that race and that performance? What did you think of it, Steve?
I thought it was brilliant. I think you can watch it back and concentrate on separate horses for the whole race. Yeah. Appreciate it, you've mentioned. It was lovely to see him back under prominent tactics. I'm not really sure what they were doing last year with it. Because as a novice hurdler, he was brilliant going out ahead, and then, I don't quite know what happened last year. So it was great to watch him. Blue Lord, I thought, travelled brilliantly into it and then faded. It was quite a slowly ran race. And I thought, rounding the bend, I thought, do you know what, Blue Lord's going to be in with a chance here? Showed his form over 2 miles. But he either just got tired on his reappearance or isn't quite up to that form. Galopin de Champ jumped carefully. I thought he was kind of a bit rusty. Fast or Slow was just making lengths out of him. JJ Slevin could even be afforded the luxury of dropping his whip late on. But I thought it was a really good run. Even Statler, I thought it was a good reappearance run. That obviously would be over miles too short for him, but he jumped and travelled well under Rachel and just obviously got done for toe, rounding the bend there. But take nothing away from the winner. He's now into 5 to 1 with Bet365 for the Gold Cup. You mentioned Corach Rambler. He would be a worthy outsider at around sort of 33 to 1 for the Gold Cup. You've got to remember that he's 3 from 3 at Cheltenham as well with 2 Ultimate Handicap Chase wins. But Galopin de Champ 5 to 2, Jerry Colombe 7 to 2, Fast or Slow 5 to 1. He's heading towards a good Gold Cup.
It's bubbling up already, and we're still in November. Just on the John Durkan, and I think I've mentioned this before on the show with regards to data post-race. There's Race IQ who is doing more and more data, and I got a little bit of a synopsis of what they made of the John Durkan. I just wanted to let people know. So according to Race IQ, Fast or Slow took 9.86 lengths out of the field in total through his jumping through the race, which was 2 lengths more than Appreciate It, who was only beaten half a length, but it was 15.8 lengths more than Galopin de Champ, who was beaten 1.75 lengths. Now, you've mentioned Rusty about Galopin de Champ, obviously running over a trip short of his best. The other thing as well about Galopin de Champ, do you remember that early on in his career, especially over fencing, he was a bit of a tearaway? I think they've worked really hard to get him to relax and settle like he did when he won before the Gold Cup, and it was all about the Gold Cup, because you can't stay that hill, up the hill without settling. And I think maybe that's just what's happened to Galopin de Champ. He's a much more relaxed individual, needs to be sort of given a couple of races before getting... So there are some people who are... Willie Mullins himself he said he was flat and disappointed, but if you took the comments out of it and just watched the race, wouldn't you be like, that was a pretty good run?
I think it was a similar run to last year. I looked back and I tried to have a check for the ratings of how his performance in the John Durkan last year was. And I think probably the rating was kind of through rose-tinted spectacles, because he beat Fakir Dudery by 15 lengths. Yeah. But at one stage, it did look okay at that point. And actually, this was a much stronger race this year that it wouldn't surprise me looking at it if it was a similar sort of performance and he takes a big step forward. We've talked around the Gold Cup looking at a race. I mean, the Savills Chase looks a brilliant race, doesn't it, this year? It's going to be interesting to see where the contenders all go, but that could be a pre-Gold Cup Gold Cup.
Yeah, and that's the one thing, they're not scared in Ireland of facing each other many times and being beaten, or just having these great contests between one another, and it just helps us trying to get some traction and context into their fight. It's just wonderful, and I was not disappointed by Galopin de Champ, because Steve said, I just felt that the race was running a different tempo, a different way this year to how he was waltzing away 12 months ago. This is a different... Totally different.
Yeah. Okay, so not all seems lost for the reigning Gold Cup champion. They were a host of top-class performances that we can reflect on. Steve has made a list for us here. I mean, it kind of goes on over 2 pages, but it's extraordinary. I mean, I'll pick out one, which I'll save for the moment. But, I mean, there's Gaelic Warrior, Classical Dream, even Thomas Darby. I mean, who would like to go first on sort of a roundup of the other performances that really struck a chord?
I'll throw some out.
Okay, go.
I was blown away by Classical Dreams chasing debut.
It was
absolutely blown away.
More so than Gaelic Warriors?
Yeah. He was foot perfect. If you want to see the definition of a foot perfect chasing debut, that was it. I mean, a lot of people will focus on Gaelic Warrior, but I thought this was a better chasing performance. He was late going chasing, but that's because he's had niggly injuries throughout his career. I mean, I think there's very little negatives around him. He's 12-1 with Bet365 for the Brown Advisory. He stays 3 miles. He's won at the Cheltenham Festival, obviously won the Supreme back in the day, and has just made a foot perfect chasing debut. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. Gaelic Warrior was good, won by 15 lengths in his chasing debut at Punchestown. He kind of let fly at a few, wasn't quite foot perfect, but what an engine he has. That was over, 2 mile 2. I wouldn't want to be backing him for the Brown Advisory. He's got so much pace. Obviously, we know that he stays 3 miles because of his Punchestown run, but I'd be more tempted to back him for the Turners. I actually think if Hassel Vega wasn't in the stable, he'd probably run an Arkle. I think he has that much pace. There was a couple of other really good training performances. Doddy the Great won at Ascot on Friday, had been off 746 days since severing a tendon. He's apparently going to be aimed at the Scottish Champion hurdle next, which is then going to be interesting.
In the waterside, disappointing.
In
that same race. Not sure what has come to light about that.
No. I was really impressed by Mighty Bandit. Won the juvenile hurdle at Punchestown on Saturday. He's now 12-1 for the Triumph hurdle with Bet365. I kind of joked with Johnny last week when he was taking the 7-1 around Burdett Road. The Irish, they're just going to bring them out up to this point to Christmas, and he's just one that we hadn't even mentioned at that time. So yeah, I'm going to be sat a bit smug over here. But come
not for the first time in this series, by the way.
Come SP when Burdett Road's double-figure price on the day. Favori de Chamdou was good in the Florida Pearl. That's a big talking point, really, was Florin Porter. In that race, obviously, you had Churchstone Warrior, unseated his rider, pestered Florin Porter the whole way. The question mark around Florin Porter was going right-handed again, and this horse just lit him up. He jumped left-handed, he hung left. I wouldn't be so negative. Bet365 pushed him out to 20-1 for the Brown Advisory there, but actually I probably thought he enhanced his chance. Going back left-handed will be good. He's obviously had his form boosted by Broadway Boy as well. Affordale Fury was disappointing, but I thought Sam Ewan was going to pull him up. He kind of made a mistake halfway round and looked down a few times. And yeah, it's going to be interesting the form of that race. The winner that day, Favori de Chamdou, is now 10-1 for the National Hunt Chase, and yeah, you could see him beheading there.
All right. Good synopsis. Tanya, what will you add to what else you saw?
Well, picking up on Classical Dream, in 2019 he beat Thomas Darby in the Supreme. We saw Thomas Darby win a Veterans.
Yeah.
But more seriously about Classical Dream, where did we last see him and who beat him? He was third to Thielm in Auteuil. Yes. Beware, everyone, of another big French name.
Horse, yes.
But we don't know whether Thielm is coming here, but the plan potentially is that we see Thielm. Okay. And that is the... what price is he with Bet365, do we know, for the stayers? I think
he's about 4 or 5 to 1, I think.
Is he? Yeah, you can see why, can't you? Yeah. The form now is getting that little embellishment here and there.
92 with Bet365.
When we see Django Bay and the Tell Her Her Name, there was another scenario of that, another rerun of that at Ascot with Beat the Bat and Welcome to Quatre. Neither deserved to beat the other.
It's a great race.
It was one of the great races. The key to that, though, was how far clear they were of the third. So we've got 2 very good horses there. Doddy the Great, as you mentioned, phenomenal training performance, 746 days. That is absolutely phenomenal. Isaac de Obo, now the...
At Chepstow.
Chepstow. That was brilliant. The 1-2 for Paul Nicholls, but the way that horse won, he just sat still. Wilkin Williams was just a passenger, and it was just brilliant.
He also looks like a chaser.
He does. He's enormous, a big nose band, and he's just a huge, imposing sort. And what are these things I'm going over? Oh, they're hurdles. I need these bigger obstacles.
See them. They're so low down.
Exactly. and he just sometimes when you get that scenario, they hesitate at the hurdles, but he it was a flow, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There was this beautiful flow. So that's what I took out. There was plenty to like in Ireland on Sunday. Another host of winners for Gordon Elliott, but of course that race, the John Durkan, was the best.
It was the best. I'm going to give a shout out to Paul Ferguson. He pointed us in the direction of Regent Stroll. Earlier on in the series, he opened up. He gave us a few horses to follow, but he was particularly sweet on Regent Stroll when he sat where you're sitting now, Tanya. And he said that this horse could be useful. And he certainly looks it. He beat a nice horse of Nicky Henderson's in second. He was also making his debut, and the third horse has form. So it's possible that we might have seen a good one in Regent Stroll. And also worth, I know it's the jumping season, but also worth giving a mention to the mighty Japanese horse, Equinox. My goodness, he's something special. Anyone who watched the Japan Cup on the weekend would have been blown away. Panther Lassa did what he did. He goes out in front at 100 miles an hour. He stretches the field out. Christophe Lemaire sits handy, and Equinox just breezes on by. Now, who knows what's going to happen? Connections are going to give him a bit of a break, but it would be superb as racing fans were Equinox to travel over to this part of the world. Maybe for the King George, unlikely. Possibly for the Arc. Let's hope he stays in training, but he is something else. So it's not a jumper. Whoa, how good would he be over hurdles, by the way? But at least we give a nod to arguably the best horse on turf in the world, Equinox. And that has been this week's Racing Recap. Now, before we get into our weekend preview, just to let you know that our sponsor Bet365 have an ITV Racing price promise. They will not be beaten on price on any horse for all UK and Irish races shown live on ITV Racing. Full T's and C's can be found on the website. And now it's time to look ahead to what's coming up, particularly at Newbury on the weekend. The Gold Cup is always going to be a hard race, but it's pretty obvious that people are going to go, Paul Nicholls is flying. Every weekend he's doing well. His horse, Complete Unknown, is a 6-1 favourite. Marla Mission, 7-1 with Bet365. Monbeg Genius, 8-1. Midnight River 9, Stump Tan for Gavin Cromwell, 10s. At 12-1, bar those. Is this the right favourite, Tanya?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Yeah, I mean, you go back to the form. Goodness me, he was run against Jerry Colombe, didn't he? Complete Unknown. You'd hope he was the right favourite. He's got kind of the right profile. Yeah. He's had 5 chase races. He was second to Jerry Colombe in the Mildmay Novices Chase. He's, as you say, trained by Paul Nicholls. You want that sort of age group. You don't want to be not too many 10 or 9 plus win. You want that sort of weight. Mind you, we'll get on to the top weight a bit later. But main case, you want to be ridden positively, and you have to. It's amazing just how fast and the speed is essential in this race at Newbury. You just have to flow over those fences. So yes, right favourite, but no, not the one that I fancy.
All right, we'll come back
hold
to that.
there.
Steve, what are your early thoughts on this race?
I thought, right profile for the race.
Yes.
Second season chaser, but not the winner for me. I really like Marla Mission for this.
Okay. Tell me about it.
Was narrowly beaten in the Grade 2 10-up Novices Chase last season over 3 miles by Churchtown Warrior, and then fell at the second last in the National Hunt Chase. Just go and watch that race back. He's 4 lengths clear, isn't stopping, and would have won that day. Guy Dominiel obviously stayed on well that day to eventually win the race, but Marla Mission would have no doubt won that race for me. That was over 3 miles 6, so it was no surprise for me to see him done for a turn of foot over 2.5 miles in the Colin Parker Memorial Chase at Carlisle on his reappearance. Was beaten by Thunder Rock that day. That will put him spot on for this. I love that as a prep run. He jumped left-handed at Carlisle as well, so heading back to Newbury, that would definitely be suiting him. I think he's rock solid. 7-1, I think is a brilliant each way bet.
Okay, we're going to go back to Tanya. And before we do, it's worth pointing out, I'm going to let people in on a little secret here. Now, if you ever watch ITV Racing and you hear any of the presenters, anybody on air say anything relatively smart with regards to knowing stats and information, it's not really Ed, it's not really me, it's not really Ollie or Jason or anybody. Tanya is the one behind it all. She's sending us messages on WhatsApp with all the latest stats and info regarding races preview and races post-race. None of us are that clever, but Tanya is.
You are.
So Tanya, What are you going for?
No, Steve puts me in the shade. And I was actually at Haydock on Saturday to do just that, what you were speaking in. It was such a thrill just to walk in the crowd. But going back to Newbury, and it's a race that I absolutely adore. I'd love a Hoist Senior to run just for once. Please, Lucinda. It would be the right kind of profile for the horse in the fact that should be kicking on out there in front. Despite his welter burden, he would love facing, I should think, popping over these fences, setting you up for a wonderful season amongst so many runs. But he's never really raced against such a big field. But he could be ahead of them, and off you go and just run a great race. Stumpton, well, he was second in the Kim Muir. Obviously, Gavin Cromwell having in great form. Midnight River was probably one of the best rides I've seen for a long time when was ridden in the Charlie Hall Chase. He was ridden to stay away from the heat of that contest and set himself up brilliantly. But the one that I really do love in this race is Twig. That has to be one of the toughest horses in National Hunt racing. And please go there, Twig. He's 4 from 6 over fences. He was superb at Cheltenham once again in that October meeting behind Wacker Clown, wasn't it? And where you just don't think that he's going to tire at all. He keeps pulling an extra out, and that's what you need for Newbury. To the ability to pull extra out, and he will have that. He'll have a low weight as well, and he's another one. See, sometimes in these big field races, there's the potential to be held back. You cannot make up the ground in these races because they're going to go at a relentless pace and they're not going to stop. Twig races up in contention. He may be 4th or 5th in contention, but he's up with contention and he's the ideal for me. I was going to also throw up Bill Baxter, but I just don't know whether he's going to head to Newcastle. But I don't see, if someone else is in that rehearsal, perhaps Bill Baxter might stay at Newbury because he might be out the handicap. But he's another one. If you've got that flow over fences and he won the Topham, it was a sweet race at the top. But I love Twig, and I thought he set himself up brilliantly at Cheltenham, and he'll be a fair price, wouldn't he?
Yeah, both those horses 20 to 1, Twig and Bill Baxter.
20 to 1, 20 to 1
with Bet365.
Thank you, Bet365. 20 to 1.
I'm with you on a Hoist Senior if he runs in the race.
Oh,
I mean, he's got a good record at Newbury as well. He won that race by 31 lengths or something like that as a novice. So if he runs, I hope he runs.
It'd be a wonderful ride, wouldn't he?
Yeah, and I think Newbury suits him. A flatter track without the undulations for jumping. I think that's up his street. And I'll throw one in at a big price as well. Cloudy Glen. He's only £2 higher than when he won the race a couple of years ago. I don't think... one thing about Venetia Williams' older horses, they tend to hold their form and they can come back after blips. I thought he ran brilliantly at Cheltenham. And going back to what you say, I'm totally on that. You didn't WhatsApp me with that, did you?
No, I didn't. No.
But horses being prominent in the race, I think it's hard to make up ground in a race like that race.
Certainly, if you watch
the Hennessy as it used to be, but
previous ones,
Yeah, so if he's handy again, I thought he could run a good race. So Cloudy Glen and a Hoist Senior. Come on, a Hoist Senior. The John Francome Novices Chase, which also takes place at the Newbury Winter Carnival, it could see the return to action of Hermes Allen, who, going into the new year last year, we were all hailing as a potential superstar. What happened at Cheltenham, obviously massively disappointing. Better at Aintree, but didn't really relight the fire for what he offered us around New Year's time. No,
it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, we've had kind of mixed success with Paul Nicholls chasing debutants, haven't we? Stay Away Faye was good, got the job done late on, but Tamurus, for example, was awful. So it's going to be interesting to see what sort of horse Hermes Allen and form he turns up in, really. I've been blown away by Nickelback on his 2 runs this season. I actually hope they drop him to 2 miles and go for something like the Henry VIII Novices Chase, because I thought that would really suit. But he's just destroyed his rivals from the front on his 2 wins. He won by 24 lengths at Warwick, 19 lengths at Stratford, and hasn't seen another rival. I mean, yes, those are poor races, but the handicap has obviously been impressed. Looking at his rating, he's only rated £1 lower than Hermes Allen, who obviously won the Grade 1 Shallow Hurdle last year. So the handicap is obviously impressed with it. Hermes Allen was, like you've said, poor at Cheltenham, better at Aintree, but was beaten at both. It's going to be interesting to see how he returns. And just with that chasing experience, I'd definitely be in the camp of Nickelback, currently available at 7 to 2.
All right. What about you?
I certainly would. I'm interested to see that Lorna Fowler's entered Colonel Mustard. It's another case of we're seeing a lot more of these really, really good horses entered here because they're trying to obviously avoid the big battalions of Gordon Elliott and Willie Mullins. So that's an interesting scenario. But I love Nickelback as well. It's lovely to see Sarah Humphries got quite a few really high-rated horses. Disappointed with Glordathen recently, but she's still got Glordathen as a great measure for Nickelback, and Nickelback has been produced brilliantly so far. And James Best, it will be excellent again if he rides a Nickelback. You remember how he rides over those national fences with Walk the Mill. He just doesn't fuss with the horses. So Nickelback will be, and as Steve says, has got the races under the belt, whereas Hermes Dallin comes here having seasonal debut, and Paul Nicholls has only won it once in the last 10 years with Clan des Eaux. But, well, that's a big enough name to win it with, isn't it? I mean, goodness me.
Dropping stats.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
But no, Nickelback. Come on, Nickelback.
All right. So Steve and Tanya, both with Nickelback for that John Francome Novices Chase. The Fighting Fifth Hurdle, kind of alluded to it earlier on. Constitution Hill, 6-1 on with Bet365. Love Envoy is 5-1. Not So Sleepy 12s. You Wear It Well 12s. And Benson 40. So there's just 5 in the race. It's possible it might be 2, 3. I mean, it might possibly be a walkover. Who knows? I mean, who knows? We don't know who's going to... But equally, it'd be great to see Constitution Hill in action, racing. But it's not a betting medium. It's one to just observe, isn't it?
Yeah, it was interesting. I watched the race back last year and they just allowed him to do his own thing. Made all that day. With You Wear It Well in there, it's going to be interesting because she's always best when she forces the pace. So whether Nico will be happy taking a lead from You Wear It Well, I'd be worried the fact that if You Wear It Well settles in second, that will completely blow her chances. So she would be my most likely horse for the forecast. But the presence that I don't know the tactics pre-race means that I won't have a bet in this. But it would be great to see Constitution Hill back.
It would. I'd love to see Constitution Hill be given a lead.
Oh, she'll do it. I think she will do it because you've seen potentially some chats with Jamie Snowden, and he's been given it never be scared of the one horse, which is quite right. And the way that she won recently, she was superb, and I think she'll just go out there and lead, and they'll be under the mindset. Obviously, we know who else is in the race, but just go and run your own. Do your own thing. Don't worry who's there. If he glides past, which we expect he glides past, but just go out, enjoy yourself. No pressure whatsoever. And also, let's just give a shout out to Not So Sleepy.
Past winner of the race.
Past winner of the race. He's in there. He ran brilliantly in the Cesarewitch. And Huey Morrison had a lovely winner the other day, didn't he?
Yeah.
He had a nice horse the other day. So, but no, You Wear It Well for the forecast. She'll show herself up in great form.
I've been thinking all along, I'd love to see Constitution Hill in one of the championship races, open age championship races, like be given a lead. His most impressive performance came in Supreme when they went really hard up front and he breezed along, picked it up and then went further and further and further clear. If something else would do the donkey work early on, we might see something spectacular from him, because all we're seeing at the moment from him, or we saw last season, ever heard, was just exhibition after exhibition. But it'd be nice to see a big number again on Constitution Hill. Okay, anything else running over the weekend? I mean, there's good racing. You touched on what's coming up in Ireland on the weekend. Impera Pass might run. Some other good horses in there's Hatton's Grace, Royal Bond, the Drinmore as well. Anything else?
Yeah, Sharjah in the Drinmore would be interesting. 2 from 2 over fences so far. He's obviously got that back class from over hurdles. Imperial Pass will be the highlight in the Hatton's Grace. There's a couple on Thursday at Thurles that I thought were interesting. Okay. Fun is entered in the mare's maiden hurdle that day. She was sent off only 5-1 for the champion bumper. Disappointed that day, but was much better at Punchestown. She'd be towards the head of where I'm looking for the mare's novice hurdle. She can finish second to Queen's Gambit for you. So yeah, she's interested on Thursday. Ilite Tomp is also entered in a beginner's chase at Thurles on Thursday as well. So yeah, that card is definitely worth looking at. Jericho de Repenay is a huge talking horse. He obviously worked with Dusart at Newbury in a workout and is suddenly 12-1 with Bet365 for the Supreme, which is madness if you think that Django Bay's 33-1.
A couple of people ask questions to Nicky Henderson and suddenly it's just blown up that this might be the second coming again.
I mean, he's got 2 entries, so he's entered over 2 miles on the Friday. That's a race that he won with John Bon a few years ago, and then he's entered over 2.5 on the Saturday. I imagine he'll go to the race on Friday, but God, he's he's running with a lot of anti-post slips.
Yes.
On him at the minute. I think it's probably worth that we mention the long distance
Yes,
hurdle.
definitely.
Yep.
It wouldn't be a betting race for me, so Tanya, I'll leave that over to you if you've got a strong opinion.
No, I just think we certainly should mention it because we've got some old friends in there and some new ones. We've got obviously Dashel Drasher may run in the race. He was a brilliantly brave third at Wetherby, and the former stood up, and he was runner-up in the stage. You've got Marie's Rock, who will be in there, and you get the question whether it's raced fit. Well, with Dashel Drasher, 10-year-olds have won it when there's a certain other name in the race in Paisley Park. What do you do with a horse like Paisley Park if you're coming into the race to try and have a bet in the race? No 11-year-old has ever won, but no 11-year-old like Paisley Park has run in the contest. He won it in 2019. I think he's finished second, third and second since then. And this just might be the race for him where the crowd kind of lifts him.
Pick him up.
Well, you'll see Dashel Drasher, if he is in the race, will go out and try and make it, and he can hit his flat spot, Paisley Park, but he hasn't got like the previous winners in the race to tackle like the champs in this race. So this could be one for the heartstrings, couldn't it? I could see everyone sort of gushing, and quite rightly, and we can perhaps, really enjoy Paisley Park on Friday.
Well, Marie's Rock is even money favourite. Dashel Drasher 11-4, Paisley Park 11-4. I like Marie's Rock. I like her a lot, but I'm concerned that what happened at Aintree might happen again. It was the first time at the trip. She travelled like the winner all the way around, and then Sire de Burlay just stayed on stronger for her. She's up against two hard-staying old-timers in Dashel Drasher and Paisley Park. Marie's Rock, I've always liked this horse, but I'm just wondering that if Dashel Drasher's out in front, she'll sit there travelling. I hope she can, because I would like her to become a star on the stage. Steve mentioned it earlier on. Stayers Hurdle division, you're looking for something to emerge.
Well, it's going to France, isn't it? So don't worry about that.
There you go.
I watched that entry race back. Looking at it in the comments, she lost a shoe that day, which may have influenced it slightly. But that was her first try over 3 miles. I went full circle on this race because when I looked at the ratings, I thought Marie's Rock, there's no way that should be even money. She's rated 152, only gets £1 from Dashel Drasher, who's rated 159. Paisley Park's rated 157, but has to concede weight to both. But Dashel Drasher was so disappointing on his reappearance.
I thought that was poor. I thought, didn't it?
Oh, I thought it was poor. Botox Haas won that. Botox Haas was conceding weight and was only rated 148, and then you had Red Risk, who was only rated 144. Like I don't think that was a very good race at all. So Marie's Rock, if she stays the 3 mile trip, I think she is a worthy favourite, but I won't be parking at even money.
I might end up back in Paisley Park again. Is there anything else, Tans, that's running over the weekend? There's the Jerry Fielden. I kind of have half a fancy.
Yeah, I know you like the Jerry Fielden.
Well, I kind of have half a fancy for Hansard in that, but I don't know if he's definitely going to run. Gary Moore's got 3 or 4 in the race, and a couple are jocked up, but not Hansard. Anything else?
No.
Jet Powered, I quite like him if he's going to run. If anyone remembers Jet Powered making his debut for Nicky Henderson over hurdles last season, he absolutely bolted up. I thought it was going to be a good race at the time. Didn't quite work out. Attack Blue was second. And then he got beaten at very short odds back at Newbury again after that, but hasn't been seen since. So saying fresh, he's got a mark of 131 for if he goes down the handicap hurdle route in the 2.5 mile handicap hurdle, which is on Saturday. That's a race I'm hoping he runs in, and if he runs in that, I like him. What about you, Steve?
I'll save my Jerry Fielden selection for the best bet.
All right. Okay. So I think we're closing it off for our preview for the weekend ahead. And hopefully somewhere in there's already a winner, but don't go away just yet because there's more coming up on that in just a moment. And before we get into our best bets of the meeting, just to let you know of a free-to-play 6-horse challenge. It's available every weekend with prize pools available for 5 and 4 correct predictions, as well as a jackpot for all 6. T's and C's apply. And here's a little bit more from Bet365 about the game and how Martin landed a £5,000 prize despite only actually picking 2 winners.
Martin, congratulations on being one of the winners of the Bet365 6-horse challenge. Tell me, how many horses did you have that won when you were a winner that day?
I picked 6.
Yeah.
I had 2 that won and 2 non-runners where they put the favourites in.
How much did you win?
5,000.
That's incredible, isn't it? So I suppose a lot of games, you wouldn't have won anything that
No,
day.
I didn't think I won anything.
5,000. So could you believe it with the turn of events?
No, I still don't believe it now. I checked my phone later on in the evening and my wife was sitting next to me and I just looked at the phone and all of a sudden I went to unpack. I said, I've won. I sent a message to me boys and they couldn't believe it either. They come back, oh, you're joking, Dad.
What's your method of choosing your horses?
When I go to my caravan, go in the clubhouse and I've got a few old boys that like picking and they tell me all the different trainers, so I listen to what they say.
What did your friends down at the club say when you told them about your win?
I can't tell you.
Right, we're getting to the end of this episode of Racing Weekly, but we're going to put together a little bit of a combination selection for the three of us. There's been a guy on YouTube who's a couple of times asked us for a Lucky 15. David, EO3SC. I'd love to know, David, the next time you get in touch with us, a little bit more about what the EO3SC was about, or whether it was just, you know, how they named Azertia all those years ago, because it's just typed the top letters on the French keyboard. And last couple of weeks, he's asked for a Lucky 15. So before we close things off, we're going to get a combined Lucky 15 from the team. And Tanya, as you're our guest this week, you get to go first with the first horse in our Lucky 15.
Oh, I'm going for an easy race, me. I'm going for the 250 at Newbury on Saturday, if that's okay. Great race. I hope, first of all, will hoist in your runs and carries the 12 stone. That will help my selection off really, really well. An 8-year-old trained by Ben Pauling, who has really captured my imagination. You need to be tough. You need to continue to flow in that Newbury race. You need to run in contention as well. You can't come from behind at Newbury. Obviously, I considered the favourite Complete Unknown. That horse had finished behind Jerry Colombe. That's awesome. But I've gone for Twig. I call it Little Twig, but certainly not. He's a big, powerful. But what I like about Twig, he seems to have a little bit extra in the tank each time. And last time we saw him was at that October meeting at Cheltenham. He ran fantastically well. And I thought that he was going to concede a fair way out, but he just kept galloping. And he wasn't beaten far in the end. Set himself up beautifully. I also considered Bill Baxter. And that just shows you how quick that race is run, and Twig can keep up with that sort of pace. So I'm going for Twig. All
right. Twig for Tanya in the Gold Cup at Newbury on Saturday. Currently, during this recording, 20-1 with Bet365. Steve, what's your contribution, sole contribution, for the Lucky 15?
So my best bet for the weekend is in the 215 on Saturday, the Jerry Field, and it's Under Control. Annoyingly, she's been well back this morning. It's currently evens with Bet365 at the time of recording. Brentford Hope's in there. He's respected. He obviously has the benefit of a recent run, won by 16 lengths over the course and distance. But Under Control is just Epatante Mark II for me. Won a conditions race in France, and then won easily over this course and distance by 4 1/4 lengths in March. Connections then took a chance, ran her only 13 days later in the Mayor's Novice Hurdle. She was never involved that day, but then she came back a month later at the track and won a handicap off a mark of 121. She then won 9 days later that valuable Novices Handicap Hurdle at Sandown, beating Iberico Lord by half a length. Obviously, the form of that has been boosted. He's been raised £8 for winning the Greatwood Hurdle since. She's only been raised £8 for this win. I think it's the 3rd, 4th and 6th have also won since in that race, so it's a really strong bit. I think she'll be running in Grade 1s before the end of the year. I even wouldn't put people off backing her at 66-1 for the Champion Hurdle. I think she is that good.
Okay.
So even though she's been backed in from 2-1 into evens, she'll be my best bet of the weekend.
Okay, Under Control for Steve in the Jerry Field and at Newbury on the weekend. I'm going to put in Jet Powered. Now, I'm not entirely certain what race he's going to run in. He's got a couple of entries in the Jerry Field, but also in the 2.5 mile handicap hurdle, which is the race I'm hoping he goes for. When he won on his debut for Nicky Henderson at Newbury last season, he absolutely bolted up and looked like a superstar. And if anybody had said after that race that Jet Power was going to be racing in a handicap at the start of this season off a mark of 131, you'd be slightly perturbed that something had gone wrong. Well, he's only had one run since winning on debut, and he disappointed. Yes, it was a really horrible day weather-wise, and I'm prepared to put a line through it. And obviously, we haven't seen him since, so I'm pretty certain things just haven't been right with the horse. But he is trained by Nicky Henderson, who's had a very good record in handicap hurdles since the start of the season. You just look back at the races at Cheltenham, all his horses seem to be running well in these races, if not winning. And he's back at the scene of that very impressive performance. I'm excited by what he might still do, and I think 131 is very generous. So jet powered, hopefully he turns up in that 2.5 mile handicap hurdle at Newbury this week. And we've got one more to complete the Lucky 15. And the two of you agreed earlier on
Nickelback.
horse running in the John Francome Novices Chase.
Nickelback. Sarah Humphries, really taken our breath away, and has had 2 starts already, and that's the reason why we're really excited by Nickelback.
Okay.
Underrated, I think, rather than highly rated.
So let's recap. Twig for Tanya, Steve going for Under Control, Jet Powered for me, and then Nickelback, a combination selection. To complete David, EO3SC's Lucky 15. Best of luck with that. Tanya, thank you very much.
Oh, it's loved it.
It's been a joy having you alongside us once
absolutely
again.
Loved it, yeah.
Steve, how are you coping with the pressure now? Different when there are no expectations, but now people are expecting you to deliver.
Now I'm just putting in even money shots. So the pressure's obviously getting to me.
Yeah.
Well, long may your run continue. Thank you very much for joining us for this week's episode of Racing Weekly, brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. My sincere thanks to Tanya Stevenson and to Steve Ryder for joining me on the show this week. As always, if you like what you've seen or heard on this or any of our shows, then please leave us a kind review on Apple Podcasts or in the comments section on YouTube. We will be back next week when we'll be joined by Richard Hoyles, looking ahead to the December meeting at Cheltenham. But for now, from the team here at Racing Weekly, bye-bye.